I don't think that anyone short of being there can ever understand that.
In the years following the HiFi murders, a lot of people in Ogden did come to understand that it did happen in their hometown. KUTV's Rod Arquette is in Ogden tonight with more on Ogden's day after. Rod?
Well, Randall, there were mixed emotions here in Ogden today, of course, about Pierre Dale Selby's execution. It's hard to find anybody here who did not want to see Dale Selby die. They also want William Andrews dead, but they know another execution means more attention on a tragedy they'd like to put behind them. It's the kind of news Ogden has been waiting to hear for 13 years. Dale Selby's execution means this community's worst nightmare is half over.
It's a relief. It's gone. It's done. I think it's great.
Each appeal and everything has brought back all of the pain of what happened 13 years ago, and hopefully we can put it to rest.
The execution dominated table talk today at Gabby and Irene Nelson's Mexican restaurant. The customers were still angry over what seemed like a never-ending string of legal delays that tried to keep Dale Selby alive. But they were relieved today because that string has ended.
I think they felt better that he was dead. Most of them were disappointed, like I say, that it took so long to do it.
Some residents say the HiFi crime has made Ogden's minority community feel uneasy. But others say the murders drew people together in a common cause to find justice.
The citizens, the merchants, the people in the town become closer knit in a cause, and that cause was we've got to find out what caused this crime and to stop it and to get the people arrested.
People have reacted to the execution in different ways. Some of those who sought justice through death celebrated Dale Selby's last night alive. But most people today just went about their business. Their thoughts were on the events of the last 24 hours. Their hopes were that the HiFi story is nearing its final chapter. Many of the offices and businesses in Ogden today seemed a bit quieter than normal. One lady remarked that's because it's Friday and everyone's ready to go home for the weekend. Another woman remarked it's quiet because everyone's reflecting a little bit about what happened early this morning at Point of the Mountain and 13 years ago in the basement of an Ogden business. Michelle?
Thank you, Rod. When we come back, the story of Courtney Nesbit in his words and through the eyes of those who knew him.
We all cried a lot with Courtney at that time.
Life may be over for Dale Selby, but we are always reminded that there was still a great deal of anguish in the lives of his victims and their families.
For Courtney Nesbit, his life was saved, but also transformed from what was once a promising future. KUTV's Deborah Linder has been talking with people who knew him then and who know him now.
The high school years began as exciting ones for Courtney Nesbit. Computers were on the technical horizon, and Courtney was a computer whiz.
There was no doubt in my mind that he would be very, very successful as a medical doctor or even in computers.
Larry Latham remembers the bright teenager whose hand was always going up in his science class. He remembers the teenager who built the winning science project, a homemade telescope.
Just did remarkable work in it. When he showed up in the classroom with the telescope, I was amazed at the amount of work that this 9th grade student had put into this project.
Nurse Ladora Davidson remembers a different Courtney, a young man who struggled near death through a painful recovery.
At times it did. At times, especially when we weren't sure whether Courtney was going to live or die, it made a big difference to see the family come in as stressed as they were.
Did it make your job harder?
Not harder, it made us work harder.
Because you really wanted to,
we wanted Courtney to get well.
The nurses talked to Courtney. They cried with Courtney. Ladora Davidson helped him fill a tremendous void.
For the first couple of years after he was discharged from the hospital, he came to the floor to see me. But I haven't seen Courtney for the last couple of years.
Why do you think he came to visit you?
I often felt that I was a mother image for Courtney. He talked about his mother. He cried about his mother. And the day his father took him to the cemetery and told him and showed him where his mother was buried, he cried the entire afternoon. But then the next morning, it seemed to be that he wasn't sure where his mother was, but he knew she wasn't available to come and be with him anyway.
Courtney Nesbit's new life is still a painful one. It does include a bright spot, his wife Kathy. But it is a life with a different way of moving, of talking, thoughts which are in his head, but which can't always come out.
I lost myself, my identity, and they affixed to me a new identity which not very many people can associate with.
He couldn't wear a watch for ages because he couldn't stand anything around his wrists. It's just a day-to-day hell. And Courtney is one of the most fantastic and gifted people I've ever known. And to see this going on in this man is hell in itself.
For everyone who meets him, Courtney is a constant reminder that survival is still a day-to-day struggle and always will be. Deborah Lindner, KUTV News.
The next person to be executed in Utah may be William Andrews, Dale Selby's partner in the HiFi robbery. Last March, when she worked for KUTV, freelance reporter Jennifer Skiff got an exclusive interview with William Andrews. KUTV promised Andrews that much of the material from that interview would not be released until after Selby's final appeal. KUTV's Rod Decker is now here with a report on the Skiff interview. Rod?
Michelle, Andrews' appeal is now before the United States Supreme Court. His case is at the position Selby's was about 6 months ago. But as Andrews is quick to point out, there are important differences between his case and Selby's.
In an exclusive interview, Andrews told Jennifer Skiff how he met Selby in the Air Force and his impressions of the man.
That's the strange thing about Selby. He didn't like to go out very much. He was basically a loner.
Selby told the Utah Board of Pardons that he was drunk or on drugs much of the time before the murder. Andrews contradicts that story.
If he drank, I never saw him drunk.
Andrews and Selby planned to rob the HiFi shop together as they were getting out of the Air Force and leaving the state.
Take the money and run.
Andrews says he knew and liked victim Stanley Walker, a clerk at the HiFi shop.
The only one I knew, like I said, was Stanley, and I did like him.
He said he joked with Walker during the robbery.
I remember joking with Stanley about how good a sale he had done with me on the equipment, how he had created a desire in me to have this equipment.
Friendly feelings didn't help. Andrews and Selby forced Walker and the other victims to drink Drano.
I held the gun, and he gave me the Drano. He held the cup. I poured it into the cup, and he handed it to the people.
Andrews says he didn't intend for the Drano to kill anyone.
I was never under the impression that the Drano would actually kill anyone.
Prosecutors say Andrews is lying. The Drano was intended to kill, and Andrews gives himself away with statements such as this.
I was informed that the Drano hadn't worked. It apparently hadn't accomplished the aims that he wanted to achieve.
Andrews told Selby he would not kill and left.
I said, I can't kill these people. I don't believe you can kill these people. So let's just leave. Let's get out of here. And I left. But when I left the HiFi shop at that time, no one was dead. No, everyone was still alive.
Andrews is a much more difficult death penalty case than Selby, for as you heard, Andrews did not kill anybody. However, as you also heard, Andrews fully participated in the crime, and for that participation, he's now scheduled to die. Randall?
All right, thank you, Rod. In a moment, a live interview with a man who fought long and hard to see that Dale Selby would be executed. It's been a 13-year battle to have Selby executed, and while it was waged by dozens of people, the man at the forefront of the battle has been Assistant Attorney General Earle Dorias. He is with us live tonight. Earle, you have fought this fight so long. Would you call what happened this morning then a victory?
Oh, as I said at the press conference last night, executions are, it's grisly business. I'm squeamish over them, and yet I'm very satisfied that we saw that justice was done last night.
You witnessed the execution. What went through your mind while you were watching what was happening?
I had several thoughts. As many of the news media that have already commented, I noticed that it was almost a clinical, antiseptic, very serene setting, much like you would see an individual being prepared for surgery and simply being sedated. And the thought did, in fact, occur to me that there was such a sharp contrast between that and what the victims must have suffered. I did see some similarities in that it was in a warehouse, rather dark building, and that reminded me somewhat of the darkness of the basement of the HiFi shop. One other thought that did come to mind, I looked at Mr. Selby's feet for some reason, and focused on those, and the thought in my mind repeatedly was the kicking of the ballpoint pen by those feet into Orrin Walker's ear.
You're a man who represents justice, certainly symbolically and I guess realistically as well. A lot of people I've talked to in this state are outraged over the fact that it's taken 13 years. How do you respond to that?
Oh, I agree fully. I'm as outraged. I really think I have cause to be as outraged as anyone in the state, because I'm the one that has had to put up with this and do all of the argument in all of the courts. I believe the final tally was 67 judges considered this case over those 13 years, and I think that's reprehensible in this society. We've got to see a change in our criminal justice system so that we can try to stop the outrage that society is now expressing.
One more question. Some of the anti-capital punishment people out at Point of the Mountain last night said this is just going to open a floodgate. Are we going to see a lot more people executed in Utah because of Selby's death?
No, in fact, I heard that same argument with the Gary Gilmore execution, which I also was involved with. That was the same claim then, and it took 10 years. These cases have to work their way accordingly in due course through the rather lengthy appellate system, and the others are quite a ways back, other than Mr. Andrews' case.
That leads me to one more question, I guess, then. Do you really believe that Andrews will be executed?
I certainly hope so. I think there is a danger here in having Selby as the lead case, so that you have a situation where members of the Board of Pardons as one tribunal, or maybe jurists, might have a tendency to think that his crimes were on the continuum less culpable and not deserving of the death penalty, when in fact it's equally as deserving under the law.
Thank you very much for being with us. Earle Dorias, Assistant Attorney General. I'm sure a tired man tonight.
The execution of Pierre Selby marks an end point for many Utahns, the beginning of an end to the grisly and senseless deaths of 3 innocent people and the torture and attempted murder of 2 others. For these Utahns, the course of justice ran too slowly. Justice delayed was justice denied.
For other Utahns, also repelled by the crime on that April night 13 years ago, the execution of Pierre Selby marks another senseless death, an execution that they fear will open the floodgates of capital punishment in Utah. Tonight, KUTV News has taken you back to the origin of a crime, and we have taken you through to the final punishment of the criminal. Unfortunately, all of this is part of life. We'll see you tonight at 10.
Good morning, I'm Susan Furness. In news this morning, after nearly 18 years and scores of failed appeals, death row inmate William Andrews was executed by lethal injection at 1:46 this morning. Andrews was condemned to die for the 1974 torture slayings of 3 people during a robbery of the Ogden HiFi shop. KUTV's Ron Bird was one of 9 media witnesses at the prison. Here is his account of the execution.
An unforgettable image. William Andrews' broad, pronounced smile greeted his loved ones as the witness curtain was drawn open. "Hi, Mama," he mouthed to his sister Audrey, who was really the only mom he ever knew. "I love you," he said, and blew kisses. Andrews laid his head down and spoke his last words to Bruce Egan, Deputy Corrections Director.
He said, "Thank those who tried so hard to keep me alive. I hope they continue the fight for equal justice after I'm gone. Tell my family goodbye and that I love them."
At 1:35 a.m., Andrews lifts his head again. "I love you. Bye-bye." A deep breath. The fatal drugs begin to flow into his IV. Only seconds pass. Andrews' breathing becomes shallower. His eyes blink, then close. His hands relax. A few quiet cries from his sister. 11 minutes later, 1:46 a.m., William Andrews is pronounced dead by the prison doctor. During Andrews' last hours, he expressed to prison officials he was tired. It was time to go.
I said to him, I said, "This has been a long haul for you, hasn't it?" And his comment to that was, he said, "Yes." He said, "I'm actually very tired." In other words, I'm more or less settled and ready to face the ultimate that apparently is before me.
For 18 years, there were pleas for Andrews' life, pleas and appeals that went unanswered, even down to the last minute. His final reprieve would come through death, an end that Andrews faced with that familiar smile.
And I greatly
Ron Bird, KUTV News at the Utah State Prison.